Welcome everyone to the latest episode of Last Week with India AI and wish you all a very happy new year. I'm Sindhuja and I'm joined by my colleague Samiksha. Together, we're going to be bringing you some of the latest news, analysis, and insights in the world of AI, specifically in natural language processing. Now, I'm pretty sure that all of you at some point would have come across the concept of NLP and the application of NLP and its various subsets to business enterprises application today. But I think what is important is to really sort of first understand, decode what NLP really stands for, what its significance is, and how it's actually fundamentally changing the way we are really looking at life and how it goes above and beyond just a typical business use case. So welcome, Samiksha. Thank you so much for joining me and wish you a very happy new year.
Hello, hi Sindhuja, and hi to all of our listeners. A very happy new year to all too.
So tell me, you've been doing a fair amount of research. I think you've done some very interesting articles in just ever since we came back from our winter break, and we decided that NLP is going to be the focus for the month of January at INDIAai. And I think you've done some interesting stories in this front. So it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about what you've been doing, what you've been working on, and what your findings have been when it comes to NLP.
So when we talk of natural language processing, I think the very first thing that comes to mind and the most obvious application is chatbots. So let me begin by telling the story of the very first chatbot that was deployed by the Indian government by a public sector enterprise in India, which was the IRCTC, which became the pioneer in using a chatbot for public good. So the Indian Railway Catering and Tourism Corporation deployed the AI-powered chatbot called Ask Disha on its portal in October of 2018. Ask Disha, which is also known as digital interaction to seek anytime help, is exactly what it sounds like. It is a 24/7 helpline for any railway passenger to get to the railways and get answers to any of their queries. Do you remember those days long back in the day when we would wait in queues at the railway ticket windows to get our tickets?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Feels like an era gone by, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's some parts of it are still fresh in my memory.
So some of it was changed in 2002 when the railways came up with e-ticketing facility. I think it began with major stations initially, but then of course it was rolled out to other stations, and today we've come to a day when all of it is possible online. You literally don't have to go to the windows. But there was this one issue always with people constantly bashing how slow the system was, how difficult it was to get to them. You'd have to call the helpline, you have to write mails, you tweet to them, never seem to get any responses. So I think the railways, well, they decided to use AI to get a certain answer to all of this, and that's where Ask Disha came into picture. It was developed by Corever, and now you can get all of your information on your journey, and recently they have introduced a functionality where you can also get all of your refund information at the very same chatbot.
Right.
So I think this has been one a noteworthy initiative. It has also received the Asia Leadership Award for Innovation Using Technology in 2019 for being the first chatbot for any government organization in India. And now, in fact, many government organizations are reaching out to engage with IRCTC to adopt this very accurate multilingual conversational AI platform. So that's, of course, something that needed to be mentioned. I think another great initiative was right at the beginning of the pandemic, when India deployed the largest ever WhatsApp chatbot in the world in the form of the MyGov Corona Help Desk in a record time of only 5 days in March of 2020.
Right.
And since then, this chatbot has been aiding our fight against the pandemic by disseminating timely and right information. I remember what a panic wave it was when we first heard about this virus called the COVID, and there were all sorts of rumors doing the rounds. People are. I think there was, the misinformation and rumors was spreading faster than the pandemic at that point.
Absolutely.
So I think it was absolutely necessary for the government to intervene and put an end to all of it, and put a definitive source of all information. And that was when I remember using it also, the COVID-19 WhatsApp help desk by MyGov. This one was developed by Haptic. It has been handling millions of diverse queries in both Hindi and English. And I think within a few months of its launch, it had catered to over 25 million users and with over 36 million queries. So I think that's a huge impact that this has created. In terms of chatbots, we have so many other, useful chatbots which are being deployed by various other government organizations. Of course, we have details to all of it in our articles, but
Right.
I'll quickly shift to one more use case just to shift focus from chatbots and come to other uses of NLP, which is and one very useful one worth mentioning here is how the Supreme Court of India is using NLP to translate judgments to vernacular languages.
Oh, that's a very, very handy use of AI, no doubt about
Isn't
that.
it?
Yeah, it is. It
Yes.
really is.
And the motivation behind it is to enable better access towards justice by providing people with the right access to knowledge so that they have the ability to independently take decisions with more freedom from a lawyer. You're
Mm.
not you're not just dependent on what the lawyer says simply because you can't decipher what's written in that language.
Right.
I think when you have it available in your own vernacular language, it just gives you more freedom to think and to decide. And now they're translating it into languages such as Hindi, Tamil, Punjabi, Marathi, Malayalam, Bangla, Telugu, Kannada, Nepali, Urdu, all of these languages with the help of artificial intelligence. And I think so far they have translated at least 300 documents, with the majority being available in Hindi. The initiative was rolled out in July of 2019, and all of these translated documents are being uploaded on the Supreme Court's official website. So for anyone who's interested, can log on and have a look as well.
It's fantastic. I think that's extremely exciting. And I think it's also so good to see how these conversations are broadening. I think you'll agree with me as well, Samiksha, and you also mentioned this rightly, wherein, synonymously, I think, when you think of NLP, the first thing you think of are, okay, chatbots and virtual assistants and so on and so forth, and, related applications. But I believe there's also so much more that one can really sort of explore. I remember at Raise 2020, one of the sessions that I attended was about the application of technologies for especially people who are differently abled, and it was amazing to see the level of conversations that are happening globally. And it also sort of made me wonder, great, it's fantastic to look at some of our Western counterparts, take a few examples from there and try to see if that can be incorporated here, but how much of it is actually happening at a ground level here in India. So and I believe you actually have a story on that, so tell us more about what's happening on that front.
Of course. Picking up from Raise, we had a very special panelist, Ms. Jenny Lay-Fleury, the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft. And I will quote her. She says, designing for people with disabilities doesn't just benefit those with disabilities, it benefits us all. And I think that's so true. And coming back to how NLP can be used to make life easier for our disabled friends, our specially able friends. I think NLP is a very powerful enabler for assistive technology for people with visual, speech, hearing, motor, or cognitive disabilities.
Right.
So let me give an example. How many times do you actually use the voice command on your phone? Personally, for me, I don't think very often. Only when I'm driving or say when I'm eating or I'm really involved with something else, do I tell Siri to call mom or would I tell Google to call someone, etc.
Yeah, you're right. I think only while driving. I can't think of any other
not very
circumstance.
often otherwise.
Yeah.
But for someone who's visually impaired or has some motor disabilities, this is the only way to call their mom, use their phone to call their mom. So these voice assistants like Siri or Alexa are powered by NLP engines, and these may just be another a cool feature for us, but it is something very absolutely necessary for these people to make their lives better. And another very powerful application for NLP is the ability to learn people with learning disabilities or with cognitive disabilities for making learning easier or transcriptions for people with other sorts of disabilities.
Right.
So there are really a range of applications that natural language processing can be applied too.
Oh, yeah.
There are some projects, some noteworthy initiatives that I'd like to mention here. Microsoft runs this program called AI for Accessibility. Through initiatives such as Seeing AI for visually impaired people.
Right.
And they've also partnered with other organizations to develop technologies that can be used to help autistic children to communicate and to enable deaf and hard of hearing students to participate in college lectures through automatic speech recognition. So I think ASR is another capability that deserves a mention here.
Right.
There's another initiative by Google by the name Euphonia, which is using AI to improve customers' abilities to understand diverse speech patterns, such as impaired speech. And they've also powered with ALS organizations to learn about the communication needs of people with ALS. And they're working towards optimizing AI-based algorithms so that mobile phones and computers can more reliably transcribe words spoken by people with these kinds of speech disabilities. So this was the good news, but as with technology and as with AI, we very well know that any bias that we have as humans, it does tend to percolate into the algorithms, and the same is the case with NLP models. So there was
Right.
this research recently that showed it's called social biases in NLP models, which act as barriers for persons with disabilities. So it shows how the bias that we have while talking about disability and the words and phrases that we use, how that tends to seep down into the algorithms, and how it actually creates a very negative environment for them, and puts them at a massive disadvantage. So I think all said and done, at the interface of NLP and disability, there is a lot more work that needs to be done to ensure that these technologies integrate seamlessly with and enhance the lives of our differently abled friends.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think that is truly the transformative power of something like AI. And I think that's also something that, we're hopefully getting more and more into as the technology is becoming a lot more mature. I think, we're able to really discover so many different use cases, as I think it's become such common parlance right now for us, to try to figure out real life situations, real life challenges that can essentially be addressed using AI. And this is also something I'd like to sort of shed some light on. In fact, Accenture had released a report earlier last year, where they spoke about it's basically titled Top Natural Language Processing Applications in Business, Unlocking Value from Unstructured Data. I think the title in itself is fairly self-explanatory and also so critical in terms of identifying the the crux of this entire issue. It all comes down to finally percolating through reams of data and really trying to see what kind of value can be extracted from that. And I think that is the huge and one of the most significant takeaways from something like NLP. So when we look at enterprises today, I mean, when we look at large scale companies which have, like, say, an upwards of say even 250 to 300 employees, even even an organization like NASCOM, which has an upwards of 250 employees working for it, and then there are several more who are associated with us in different ways. I think the core functionality is to really be able to try to understand how these different kinds of employees can sort of seamlessly work with each other, what kind of data that we have at this point in time, how can the organization really sort of benefit from that, and figure out a way ahead, figure out strategies, figure out ways to sort of help us in different mannerisms within the organization. So I think that is fundamentally a problem that I think enterprises at a far more complex level are facing today, which is to sort of try to funnel the existing data that they have, and then actually try to find the right kind of data at the right time. For instance, if it's a hiring need, where are they going to get that relevant data from to try and understand what kind of people need to be hired for what kind of roles, or if it's some other kind of data crunching that they have to actually do and there's not a lot of time available for that, so how are they going to do it? So these are the various kinds of real life existing situations or use cases, as I might call it, which exist within large scale companies today, which can be effectively addressed using NLP. So some of the some of the most obvious or some of the more popular use cases that come to mind at this point are basically, of course, the use of chatbots and assistants. I think that's ubiquitous when it comes to
Of
deploying
course.
some NLP
Yeah.
as a commonly used platform. But beyond that as well, there are a lot of other aspects that we can get into, such as smart document analysis. This is something that's very valid. For instance, when you're looking at legal contracts or when you're looking at compliance issues, how do you actually find who signed what contract at what time and what content is actually there in any of those contracts? And it's not like people have a lot of time available to sit and read these, pages and pages of legal parlance. It'll be
Yeah.
fantastic to have, a range of AI tools that are readily available that can read these documents really quickly and tell you exactly what you want and give you exactly the information you require.
Correct.
Similarly, like document searches, data storage analytics, sentiment analysis. Now, this is something that's becoming really popular, especially for companies which are thriving, on, building their brand and building brand awareness online. I think it's so important today to really try and understand what your users and customers are talking about you on social media platforms. Is it a positive sentiment? Is it a negative sentiment? How badly does it affect my stock? How does it affect my product? What can I do, differently to try to make my customers happier? So, these are the different kinds of use cases that sort of assume or find their place in companies which are trying to really try and understand what the customer really is thinking at that point, because he's behind a screen, so is the company at that point in time. So how are we going to try to decode these various sentiments? So sentiment analysis is something that is going to see a huge adoption in the months to come, especially when it comes to the capabilities of NLP, because emotion and emotional assessment using AI is going to be another very, very big application in the days to come. So these are the different ways I feel, NLP really has a huge level of application within enterprises today. It's just a matter of trying to find the right kind of resources and the right amount of data to try and figure out how best to decode it and make it more useful to the people that are actually using them. And that said, I think it's also sort of fair to nod to the fact that, while it's initial days and it's also initial very exciting days for when it comes to technologies like NLP, there are some challenges that exist in this particular domain. And I think one of the fundamental challenges is essentially, if you think of it this way, when there's a baby, I think one of the
Yeah.
first things that it does is to really try to see, listen, understand the language that is being spoken around it. And that's kind of how we all acquire something called a mother tongue. It's
Sure.
basically the first language that we essentially end up picking up. And
Right.
obviously it's English that becomes a form of communication and guidance when we go to school. But
Yeah.
it's the familiarity of the native language that sort of sits well with us at the end of the day. But truth be told, when we look at it from an app perspective, when you look at it from a technology perspective, everything you open today is purely completely in English. So what about the billions of users in our country, the millions of users, I apologize, the millions of users in our country, which are essentially more comfortable with a vernacular language? What about the various farmers that we have, the various healthcare professionals that we have serving in rural areas, the various other laborers and migrant population, and so many other people who live, and the diversity of experience that India offers at this point in time? It's very unfair to club it and say that English is going to be the only language that can offer that range of experience. The true power and the true might of AI is to really be able to decode this very experience, but in a language and in a manner that everyone can understand and everyone is really very comfortable with. So definitely, there are some challenges that exist within this domain. I think, like I even mentioned earlier, sentiment analysis is touted to be a very big game changer in this particular space. But again, sentiments are so different when it comes to a commonly spoken language of instruction like English, as opposed to, say, Tamil, which I speak at home, or Punjabi, which you speak at home, Samiksha.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think,
Yes. Of
the
course.
getting the nuances of these right is also something that's going to be a huge opportunity. I think, if you look at it that way for in a field like NLP. And for instance, when you look at more semantics of a particular language, like something like metaphors or idioms or common phrases, these are not things that say a natural language processing machine can easily understand.
Yeah.
So there is going to be a very interesting intersection, in the days to come, with technologists and linguistic specialists to try to figure out how to really build a very intuitive machine. And if they can actually achieve that in Indic languages in a country like India, then I think it's it's only a matter of sort of tweaking the same concept, but for a different language in everywhere else in the world. And, it just think of the numerous possibilities if you go to any other country, even in Asia for that matter. I mean, China, the commonly, of course, the most accepted languages are, Mandarin. And if you go to Indonesia, it's Bahasa. If you go to Malaysia, it's Malay. And, these are the mediums of instructions. These are the various ways that people actually communicate with each other. And it's not always English. So I think NLP is sort of at the brink of something very exciting, and there's a huge range of applications that we're looking at, and we've literally just scratched the surface right now. But I think very exciting times ahead for this piece of technology, and especially for those who love languages and who are also interested in technology. It's going to be a great time to really sort of understand what's happening around them and try to see if they can contribute to this really new movement in AI in a totally different way.
Yes, sure. And, with I remember what Raj Reddy said at Raise 2. He says that I think less than, given the size of users that India provides for the internet, I think he said that it was less than 1% content on the internet that was available in Indian languages.
Precisely.
If I'm getting the figure correctly.
Yeah.
And I think it's absolutely shocking for each one of us. And to cite the 2011 census figures that show that we have around 121 major languages and about 1,600 other languages. I think India is just the right playground for some path-breaking work in vernacular NLP. And well, I'm happy to report that some good work is in fact happening at our universities. We've spoken about the public sector. We've spoken about corporates. And I think finally it would be right to mention a little bit of what's happening on the research side of things as well.
Sure.
So we do have some good initiatives happening at India's universities. I'll just quickly go through some of them. We have the INDIAai TTS, text-to-speech synthesis systems at IIT Madras, which is a project for developing text-to-speech synthesis systems for Indian languages and for improving the quality of this synthesis. We also have the Center for Indian Language Technology, the CFILT at IIT Bombay, which was set up in 2000, which has around 30 research members, including PhDs, masters, and bachelor students, and linguistics and lexicographers. So, so they are using deep semantics and multilinguality for a pivotal role to lead to some great research on multiple fronts. And the Language Technologies Research Center, LTRC at IIT Hyderabad, is conducting research on both basic and applied aspects of language technology. This is in fact the largest academic research academic center of speech and language technology in all of South Asia. So I think that India is on the right track, and we just got to keep going and keep the pace. And yeah,
it's I think as an ideal sign off, and and it's not necessarily related to NLP, but I think as a sort of a commentary on India, this is so relevant. So Brian Acton, who's the former, the co-founder of WhatsApp and now the more popularly used app Signal, pretty much said the same thing. If you can build for India, I think it's like building for the world. And I think that's also a comment that has been made by more than one person in the past. And I think if the confidence of being able to build for a country like India is something that makes you want to take on the challenges that the rest of the world really has to offer, because the kind of range and depth and the diversity of experience that you can face in an experience in a country like India is second to none. So I think it's very interesting times, like you said, Samiksha, and very, very interesting insights in just 2 weeks of just covering NLP so closely. We have some more great stories coming up on this front in the next couple of weeks. We have some very interesting startups in this particular space, enterprises that are working on some very exciting NLP tools to support more endeavors. And of course, Samiksha also has some great stories lined up for you on all to do with NLP and research initiatives on this particular space in terms of trying to understand what Indian colleges are doing. So that's all we have with us this week, and we'll be back next week again with another round of very exciting stories, views, and opinions on shaping the AI narrative for India. You can follow all our updates on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Until then, stay safe, stay connected.